All right, Rob. How great to get another score from you. And yeah, you in the past you've had this kind of love of exploration and and just kind of striking out in different directions with your orchestration. So let's talk about some of this and like yeah, to sort of judge like how much does that really fit in with the idea of a period score, right? See, because like by using trumpets in C, like natural trumpets, natural horns, right? That sort of it in a way it sort of limits you, right? It's it's kind of saying, well, you kind of have to go along Beethoven's lines, which are actually pretty safe, harmonically speaking, right? Because like what are the actual implications, or the not implications, but what are the actual results of scoring this the way that you've scored it? Okay, so to start off with, your horns in C, just from listening to the mock-up, you have got these as horns in C alto, right? So in other words, not C basso, right? Because if we're C basso, this would sound an octave lower. Do you see what I mean? So this were to be scored for C basso horns, it would be actually out of the range of the horn, right? It would be like up an octave, and you'd have like a high D, right? Which is like not exactly kosher. And then you end up with all of these. You sort of end up with all of these stopped pitches, right? Like the A's right in here, and then these like the F and the D and so on. But like you can actually the D isn't stopped. Excuse me. It's early in the morning. I have a massive rehearsal today, so on top of a little bit of brain fog left over from recuperating, I'm also it's also just a tad early, so you might hear my voice being a little froggy, maybe clearing my throat from time to time. I have to attend a rehearsal with New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, which is performing an entire program of my arrangements with the signature choir at the end of this week, which I cannot go to. It's in Auckland, and I'm not well enough to drive up there and drive back. All right, so we're dealing mainly with like Fs, right, and As and so on. So like we're had this been sort of reorganized, then like this part right here could have stayed in the F horns, and it would those pitches would be more consonant, and then you could have the C horns getting other pitches within like your F horns that are more compatible to open pitches, right? So that was one of the problems right here in having this be like non-transposing horns, right? That is a very high horn, and it has a completely different character, and it has extreme limitations on its upper end, right? Yeah. So for instance, like its highest note is just up a little teeny bit higher than this D. Like this is up to F, right? So that would mean like it's the equivalent of for an F horn for this to be like high A, right? Which is not a piano note. So there are problems with that, right? And then like here you got a couple of Fs stopped or half stopped, and then here when you go to this will flare, right? Because both pitches are stopped. It'll have like a very kind of a sound. But then like this other scoring is nice, like C's and G's and so on. Now you do not need to go a due here. Like it's powerful enough with everything else. You just need single horns here. Yeah, and the same thing here. Right? This should all be single horns, and this stuff pretty much abides by the limitations. So yeah, so it's I mean, you make the same kind of compromises that I do in my scoring. So it's not totally out there, but this is out there, right? It just needs a little bit more study of basso horns, right? This can't be two horns in C, it has to be, you know, 2 horns in C alto or 2 horns in C basso, right? It can't just be 2 horns in C full stop, right? Okay, so now let's talk about, let's say that you reorganize this so that this was an F horn part and that you, like the lower voice here was, you know, like maybe in the C horns and so on, the C basso horns, right? Then I would say, I mean, this is a nice intro. I mean, it's very, it's similar in some ways to some other intros that we've seen, you know, that use like lower winds, horns, and so on, tremolo, lower strings, and I don't think there's any need for the violas to necessarily stop here. I think that they could continue on and support the second bassoon. But one thing I do think you do not need is a duet here on your first bassoon, or excuse me, on your bassoon line, not first bassoon. Try not to have unison bassoons above A, okay? Just think of sort of the top of the bass staff as a cutoff point. In fact, even that is a little high. And usually unison bassoons should be accompanying like maybe like a bass line in the brass or in the horns or strings, right? And that's just like, that's a way for the sound to spread a little bit. Whereas if they're really exposed and they're really high, then it just really does sound kind of, you know, it either has like a really unusually exotic sound, you know, if the players are really, you know, if they are really good players and their intonation is absolutely spot on, it's almost trombone-like, okay? And it's, you know, if both players, like, because both players have to limit their expression, but it's just problematic. Just, you know, I mean, I know what you're trying to do here. Like, you're thinking, well, the bassoons need to be stronger here because, you know, they're up against the horns, but like, don't worry about that. Just write this as a single line and maybe write it lower, right? Okay. Okay, so like I would say, you make those adjustments, then I would grant that this would be a good, you know, a really nice intro, and I would think that it would set the mood effectively for moving onwards to this. And I really like the fact that you go straight to the strings, right? So you're going from, you have a beautiful contrast here. You know, horns and bassoons with tremolo, middle strings going directly to just strings, right? And I think that works great. Now here, I would say, yeah, you know, Rob, haven't we talked about this before? Slurring from the pickup, right? Like, you know, if you're trying to emphasize the downbeat here, then a slur to the downbeat would be better with like maybe an accent on it or a fermata, a tenuto mark on it, right? Just like duh, right? But that's not what you're going duh. I mean, do you really want to rob that downbeat of any kind of push, right? Just imagine. Let's reorganize this. Da da da, and then downbeat or downbow. Da. Do you know what I mean? It just has. I mean, especially if you're going, you know, ba, 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 right? You know, it in your accompaniment or thung, 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 thung. Like you have the peak of the crescendo right on the downbeat here. So why is there no emphasis from the melodic line to line up with it, right? Now here, this is good, and with these repeated C's, you could do this as portato, right? So just a tenuto mark on each one and a slur, right? And it sort of has that nice lift and pulse to it. But like here, I mean, well, this will work. It probably lines up better. Like you want a down bow here, right? And this is obviously an up bow. So up bow, down bow, down bow? No. So how about if you were to divide this into two, right? So da da da, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. See, it's just like completely natural and much more in, in the character of Beethoven. So, all right. So, before I brought up the whole question of, like, how appropriate is it to have natural horns? And the context was not just like whether or not you are asking for, you're writing these beautiful lines and so on. This is really bothering me, the way that these don't line up. How does that happen? Is this something that happens in your notation application? Because Sibelius won't let you do that. You have to sort of monkey with it to get it to not line up. Okay. All right. So the issue is more than just stopped pitches in a very soft, elegant line. Right. It has to do with violating Beethoven's harmony, and you do that a bit here, right? Like, it's like you're not really following Beethoven's harmony exactly, and you can hear it, right? You can hear the kind of the changing around, but really this da 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 da, this is not this is not what's happening in the source score. Now, like, if your idea was to have kind of rising harmonic pitches, then they should rise in line with the harmony of the piano score, right? And they don't here, right? So if you're thinking, oh, well, I really want it to sound more like Beethoven, I wasn't really trying to sound modernistic here, then look, you just have got to study that harmony a little bit better, right? And then if you want this to be more modernistic, then you don't need natural horns, right? Just go with valve horns, just a standard quartet of modern F horns, just the standard double horns, and then just be as modernistic as you like. You don't have to worry about the limitations, right? Maybe you could have had like triple pianissimo horns, right? Pianissimo for our for our jackals out there, for our pedants out there. But yeah, you could, and then you increase the role of the horn for yourself, and you take away, right? You take away some of the limitations that might otherwise be implied. Okay, yeah. Try not to have like a dotted half note. So, like, if you're cleaning this up, you don't want to have dotted half notes preceding a pickup note in common time. You need the half rest and then a quarter rest, and then, because it's just this, the players want to see the middle of the bar, right? They want to see that beat number 3. Okay. But it's all right. Like, I cheat occasionally too on a sketch score. All right, so let's continue on to the next. Actually, I skipped a step here, and I apologize. So with those caveats here in your string scoring, I would say, for the most part, your melody starts elegantly. There's a natural transition to octaves. You expand without clogging up, because you keep the accompaniment part like very basic, and basic in a good way. Okay, and there's a natural flow here. It is not very flowy, but there's just kind of a natural rhythm. Watch out for things like this, a bar rest instead of just like a single quarter note, because like this, the player will be counting 2 here, and then they'll be counting 4 here when there's just a single beat, right? Because like in their part, it's a bar rest, and that means 4 beats, right? So just really watch out. So that's happening in your notation application, and it happens in Sibelius too. It's a curse. It's a curse. Any Sibelius developers out there, you should have fixed this by now. Okay? There's absolutely something that should not happen. Okay. Naughty, naughty. Now let's go ahead to the Leggermente section. So do you contrast with theme? I think it's beautiful that you do, because like here you have the oboe starting, which we have not even heard yet, right? Like it's just it is a voice that has not been applied. So and you keep the word leggermente in here, which has been dropped by other arrangers. That's really a great idea. And one solo, yes, it's very good marking. Yeah, and you add some harmonic support. I already talked about that, how it's sort of kind of atypical. Um, yeah, I'm not sure that I'm totally on board with this inversion. Like the meaning, the harmonic meaning here of the C seventh chord is very hard on the ear. Like it's really hard to hear with the way that you have got it spread out like this. Like you've got a G fourth up here and a B flat way down there. So the relationship of the seventh, not I mean the inversion notwithstanding, it's so far away from these other pitches, right? Like what you would need here is the mediant more than the fifth, right? Like so if this were say an E sixth, it would be a lot easier to hear. And if the B flat were like up an octave, right? So that would be. But I mean, like the strongest of all would probably have been like G in the cellos, B flat in the second violins, and then E in the first violins down a sixth, right? That would have been like probably the strongest configuration, a good old jazz chord. Yeah, and so right here, right. Once again, you have this modernist thing. Maybe you weren't noticing that this is not consonant, right? So it's like an upside down F major seventh chord, right? You put when you bring the major seventh at the bottom, and that just interferes with the clarity of this line here, right? So I mean, you got to proofread your harmony a little bit better here, Rob. Okay, now let's move on to emphatic color of line. Um, I mean, you got this piccolo right here. If you and you're going da 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 da. Why not just go ba 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 ba? There's absolutely nothing wrong with the flute starting up here on a high F. And you're not telling us how many flutes are playing from right here. So it's almost as if maybe you started this here and then you added this or something. I'm not sure. And here you say ordinario. Ordinario of what? Ordinario, I mean, like what technique did you apply here? You're saying leggermente is no longer leggermente, so this is ordinario? Or you're saying, oh, this is no longer a solo, so this is ordinario. Don't worry about canceling a solo. All right, the players know. All right, just by the context of the part. You do not have to say, okay, no longer solo, now tutti, or no longer solo, ordinario, or normale, or whatever. Okay? Don't even bother, Rob. That's not what you need to do. I would say here, you're better off having your flutes come in here. And, they could be a duet, that's fine. But like an octave higher. But I'm not so convinced by this jumping up again, right? Because you're leaving a gap in the middle. See, the way that you got this scored is you got the oboes walking down in conjunction with the violins. Okay, great. And then you got your bassoons coming in here. Okay, and once again, you don't need ordinario. You got your bassoon coming in here and walking down underneath, right? Which, don't you think this bassoon would be better off supporting the harmony, right? Because like we're losing this voice that was right here in the middle, but perhaps you're thinking, well, I'm supporting it with the overtones from the bassoon below. Okay, I guess, but then the thing is you've got this function walking all over the lower part here, the harmonic roll, the bass, and so on. That's just something that Beethoven would never do. All right. Now, if you're coming in a due here, then where does the second bassoonist start their? Where do they start their slur, and what is their dynamic indication? Yeah. And then you have the clarinet suddenly adding force in here, so that will make, in retrospect, the listener will suddenly feel that it's fuller, and they will insert a gap into their perception before, and rightly so. So to make things smoother, I would say, like, it would be better for your oboes or let's say this harmonic stuff could be given to the clarinets, or okay, now let's flip that around. Let's say that this was a clarinet part, and it continued on and just naturally walked down into this and came back up, right? And then this could stay an oboe part, and this could start an octave higher a due, right? And then maybe this bassoon stuff could just be doubling like violas and cellos, right? And then then it'll be way cleaner. Now this is kind of interesting. But before we get into that, let's talk about how, like, the dynamics are incredibly unclear here. You need to have some kind of destination dynamic so that we have something to contrast with when we drop back to piano. Because here, you're saying piano leggermente crescendo to piano. That doesn't really make sense, does it? So it would be better for you to, thinking about how the dynamics are sort of stretched across all these different parts. It would be better for you to have like a forte mark at the end of every bar that has a crescendo in it. Well, I guess they all do. And then piano subito, right? Then suddenly everything makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Maybe crescendo to mezzo forte in your brass. All right. So that would be a way of clearing up the problem that you have now, which is like, one of my criteria is emphatic color of line, right? So right now you have a very uneven color or uneven consistency of line, and the colors are all over the place, right? And this is creditable, and this is great. Working, setting up the harmonic density, pushing forward, and it helps to justify your tutti here. But did you notice how much this little piccolo part just throws everything off? Right? Because the way Beethoven has set everything up, he's going da 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 bum bum bum. He is pushing. He is absolutely giving the orchestrator every possible setup to go right to the tonic, and to also start off this melody on the tonic, right? But when this little piccolo comes in here on da da da, right? It's like harmonizing. It not only does it throw off the clarity of the line, but it also throws off like the thing that follows da da da, right? Here you're going da da da. How come you didn't go da da da? Right? How come we don't have further harmony? So if you're not going to do that, then you shouldn't do this, right? Is the way I would say in terms of proportion. And then just like the very last thing is like, I think that you're trying to set up something where like the player changes direction on the bow after they've gotten to the bottom of the line. Don't worry about that stuff. Okay, it is better to have your strings. It's like you just get a much more emphatic, clearer, organized sound by having the bowings work together. Da da, right? And the same thing here. Like you knew what to do with the flutes, right? And so that bassoon should be the same exact thing, right? And I would say the same thing with the clarinets. If you take my advice, drop this here, and then supplement this an octave lower into this, and change this into bassoon, like change the bassoons into this function, then everything just suddenly becomes really, really clear. And you don't have to boost, like the way that you boost the flutes up here. It just actually confuses the function of the piccolo part up here, right? The way that it is. I mean, and I see what you're trying to do here. You're trying to run up here, under here to harmonize, and then you have the A and so on. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea, but it's not very well organized up there. No disrespect intended. And once again, we've got like a lack of justification in parts. Like this, the beginning of the beat for beat number 4 is all over the place a little bit. So I'm wondering if that's something that can be fixed maybe there's a justification command in your notation application. I don't know. Okay. All right. So just warnings about that. So with just the general comments that I've put out there about the harmony, with that fixed, then I think that this works pretty well. But I would just want the same approach in both of these bars, right? So if you're going to come back to this really simple part, like this, setting this up with this bar right in here, not having the elements that it had before, you're cutting the flutes and clarinets and bassoons. I just feel like this is, this doesn't dramatically set this up very well, right? So I would just say, try to have more, try to make sure your proportions are even, especially with Beethoven. Okay. All right, so that leads us to the B section. So, another criterion was like to have a fresh new color. And here you've chosen to go flute and oboe. And I've already talked about, the push here. Now this is kind of modernistic, isn't it? This kind of hangover of the harmony here. Which is not really in line, like this harmonic idea is not really in line with the harmony that's given in the piano part, which is really simple, right? It's just G and A stuck together, right? So just really make sure you know what you're doing going forward here in this kind of harmonic situation. Because, I feel that this is robbing it's kind of dragging down the energy of this da-da-da, 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 da-da-da kind of stuff. And in fact, you are completely relying on first clarinet here to finish, to complete this rhythm right in here. And you don't bring in your second violin or your flute, right, to sort of support what's going on in these other parts till later, right? So this kind of thing dragging across is holding back, and of course you're not going to get 3 beats on this and 4 beats on that. They should just be, look, okay, this is something we've discussed before, Rob, right? That timpani stroke, especially a stronger one, the timpani sound is using the hall for your reverb. So there's no for the sustain. So there's no need to mark incredibly long pitches for the timpani part, right? You can mark sostenuto or whatever, but this all the more is adding to sort of the dragginess, right, and kind of pushing back on the energy. This is interesting, by the way. So why does this one have a slur and this one not, right? So this one with a slur on it, you're basically saying this is all under one bow. Without the slur, there's an implication, not completely justified, that the player is to change bows, right? And here's a situation where you would be perfectly, if you really wanted a bow change, this is where I would say you're justified in writing in the bow markings, going up bow, down bow, right? So you're just saying, yeah, change bows when you get to the destination note. Yeah, this is kind of fun, this do. Yeah, so I mean, so this would be like a place where slurring across the downbeat works within the context of the other things that you want to do. Okay. This is a hell of a lot of doubling on the same pitch, right? Did you notice how like really your mock-up sounds here? It's just because you have so much stuff doubling so many pitches, kind of all the same way, right? And just really like hardly any supporting harmony in the proportional place where Beethoven puts it, right? You got stuff happening an octave lower, right? But like Beethoven wants it right under the melody, right? So like changing things to like an octave melody here after the fact doesn't take away from the fact that there's a big gap between this high F here and the harmony below. But this is still kind of a fun idea, sort of scorching up to that B flat. Still, yeah, not sure that really works in terms of the, especially with this like this timpani pitch below on the C, right? It's kind of strange. Okay, all right. So moving on to the dovetailing and trading off and so on and so forth. So I mean, this is one solution, right? This dun da dun da dun da dun da dun da dun. The thing about putting the staccato on the beginning of each beat is that you get a different articulation from the slurred one in the other part, right? You could have easily just gone da 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 da. So just like just a simple 16th followed by bum bum. And that's another one too. But I mean, of course, that's just like my idea. Maybe you don't need to obsess about this so much. Like I get the concern. You don't want this to drag and interfere with the leap upwards in the first part, right? I'm not so sure that that's the hugest concern. Maybe just going 16th to 16th, right? Yeah, I'm just I'm worried about the kind of abruptness versus the kind of smoother pattern here. Okay. So, you're widening the gap here. That's nice. So really the emphasis here should be on the alternating note. So this ba da 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 da, right? It doesn't really need to be on the other parts. It's something that yeah, so like especially like on the very lowest notes, I don't think it needs to be there at all. Although it's really great the way that you're expanding this outwards. Look, if the piccolo is not going to play a strong, more of a part going to the cadence, then I don't think it really, has. I'm not sure that this adds a whole lot, but I mean, it's just a matter of taste. If you feel that it makes sense there, then that's fine. You don't need to change to second. The first player can play this all day long. Okay, it's all good. Better to just save it for a duet here, right? Okay, what is the staccato doing over this rest? What's that mean? Okay, and like in here this happens too. I'm wondering if this is like left over from your notation application when you took the high C out. Then you ended up with this. Now, if this was intentional, this doesn't mean anything. The staccato belongs over the final note. You're better off without the slurs here in your C horn. and you don't need to be a duet here at all, especially not with your like nobody will be able to hear anything else besides these horns. Realistically speaking, I don't care what the mock-up sounds like. Yeah. But yeah, interesting, very cool. This could just be a dotted half note pushing towards this. All right. All right, so now let's get to the C part. That's nice. This beautiful oboe solo. We got a little clarinet and the bassoon coming in, and it's just doubling the strings and so on. Okay, that's all. That's all really lovely. So like new quality of tone, not really, because once again it's just like a mixed string and wind tone. Like you probably could have gotten like just a real, if you want a real decided contrast here, you could just cut the strings, right, and just do this all in winds. But you don't need to do that. I mean, it's just a matter of proportions. All right. Okay, yeah. All right. So look. Why? Why, Rob? How many times have we talked about the weakness of low flute? Right? Like, what is it doing here? Right? Especially when you have to think that like flute is like a square tone. Clarinet is a square tone. Right? They're very or square wave tone, right? So they have relationships to one another. But here they're weak and inconsequential, and if they are heard and blend, they will confuse the clarinet line. But why are the clarinets a duet here? Like, why take that beautiful purity of line, like sitting right in the throat tones and then going up to higher pitches here? Okay, so why? And then here, why not just, do... All right, we'll be talking about this throughout all of this part. But why is why do we have our, like this kind of thing? This sort of overlap doesn't work, all right? What did Stravinsky and Debussy and Ravel and all of those great guys talk about as something that had been worked out for an entire century of solving this problem, going from first to second, right? What was their conclusion in the end? Was that you should always dovetail on the downbeat, not any of this stuff. Like look at what you're asking these players to do. You're asking them to come in absolutely perfectly just before the beat, just before this, and then on to this. So what you end up with is players who might count slightly off, not line up with this, and in their anxiety about this, they also throw this note off, right? I've heard it happen before in rehearsals of composers, like or like developing composers and bringing stuff like this to community orchestras. So your option here is to dovetail on the beat with just a single note. Do not worry about it. They will make it sound clean. They will make it sound way cleaner than this. Okay? All right, so cut the flute, make this a solo clarinet, make this a solo flute. All right, and then you get the absolute, just most best sparkling sound. Okay, but all that aside, this is a little cloggy right in here. But I actually like the fact that that you have lower and then higher, right? Some people were just expanding. Some people were playing both of them in the same exact octave both times, so there was kind of like no contrast. There was no sense of rising upwards, right? But this is nice. I'm not so sure that the strings need to be quite so expansive here, but it's still cool. And you do not need to have a duet here with your horns. Why does this say horn and this say C horn? So F horn, C horn, right? But look, once again, like, despite all of your care, which is admirable, and I really respect it, I think that you could have just gone with like four four valve horns in F, right? Four modern horns in F, just because of the, you know, some of the more modernistic language you are using in your harmony. All right, so here we're going back to do 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 do. So you just, you know, just being aware that this is very spicy. Like you're going from a very spicy, very out there, you know, like by slurring up from, you know, G up to this E, it's really going to spike, right? And you know, once again, look, the flute's got no chance here. And then the overtones alone will be enough to kill what's going on in the flute here to a degree, right? And then what's this, like, here you were so concerned to make this absolutely be, you know, completely undetectable, the dovetailing here. And then here we've got this long note here, which absolutely is heard, right? And then we've got this other long note, which will be heard. And this other note, which will stick out like a huge sore thumb. So, probably, like, the solution here is just to have this, I would say, cut the flute, have this end on, you know, just sounding like written G sounding F, just end on a single 16th note, okay, and then just let the bassoon pick up, you know, and that will actually sound cleaner than this. I mean, I sort of see this as an attempt to kind of paste over, like, between these two parts, but I don't think that the flute is really adding a whole lot. Why can't the bassoonist just, like, slur down to an F? Right? Okay, so just to hang on, I'm looking at the original score. Right, so like you're sort of like changing the melody around here a little bit to kind of conform to the bassoon. But, like, what if you just did what, you know, da 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 dum, bum 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 bum, G E C, yeah, and then just gone to an F here. I just, like, dovetailed onto. Maybe rearrange this so that you end up lower down towards the end of the line, and you end up dovetailing to this F. I think it would just be really, really clean. Yeah. Okay, and then just like the last issue here is there were a bunch of, well, there were some harmonic changes here, and like you shifted the positions of the chords around in a way that really called attention to the chords, right? Just like it was just like, hey, look at this harmony up here. I think you got to keep this, like, if this soli passage for the cellos is going to have any kind of meaning, you've got to keep that harmony in the background, right? Don't do things that call attention to it, right? Just like it's just a matter of kind of dramatic proportions. Yeah, because I didn't feel that this seamlessly led back to ya da 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 da, right? Just because of this, you know, and like here you're asking for. I mean, Flattered sung in the flutes is going to have this kind of shivering sort of a quality, but in the oboes it's going to be like really like a Bronx cheer, you know. It's going to be brrrr, you know. It just really has this. It's, you know, this, it would be better for if you want like smooth tremolo leading back to this. It would be better in the strings, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I think that this part needed a little bit of work if you want it to go back. But like, all right. So like here I picked it apart, and I've trodden on a lot of your ideas and things like that. But that doesn't mean I disapprove of it. in any way, shape, or form. I really love the sense of experimentation that you are applying here, right? So if you're going to experiment with it a lot, you don't need to have, you do not need to wear the court gown, right? You do not need to have the powdered wig of natural horns, right? And you do not need to wear the costume of the period orchestration. So, and if that's so, then that gives you more permission for you to be even more expansive and exploratory, and better organize horns, have them in places where you could add some subtlety, and you could play around with the harmony more, right? So that I would say that would be like my first biggest kind of bit of feedback in terms of playing around with the harmony. So but if you are going to play around with the harmony, make sure that it makes sense in context, in dramatic context, because there are a few changes that you make to the harmony here and there that don't really like lead us to the next part in a logical way, right? So like you can experiment around with it, even throw in a substitution chord, say, maybe, or have some kind of reordering of the chord progression. That's all cool. I'm absolutely behind that, but just make sure that it takes us to the next part in a really logical way. All right. So that would be my my overall impression of it. But like, having said all that, like, you put a crap ton of work into this, and that is something I will never cease to be gratified by and appreciative of and awed by, really, from everybody. Like, what is this like? We got close to 200 entries this year. And that is something just like I'm just eternally in awe of, and thankful for. I think this community has got so many like, I'm seeing the arc of people's creativity and their command of orchestration getting stronger and stronger, and their ideas are just so, even ones that I might sit here and say, oh, well, that doesn't quite work. It doesn't mean that just like the context of the idea might work, but the intention of the idea might be extremely pure and workable, like with just a little bit more perspective, a little bit more thought about certain details that that I will try to supply, right? So with all of that, in the sum of things, this was really a great entry, Rob, and it really got me thinking, and it really tested me as a coach to to try to give you workable solutions, right? Because that's the name of the game. So thank you so much for continuing to enter these orchestration challenges, and for your own improvement in your work, and sharing that with us. That takes a lot of courage, and I really appreciate that. And and the support of the channel, that's just the icing on the cake. So so folks out there, like, I really hope you've got some constructive comments for Rob. And Rob, I've seen you dropping in with some comments too on some of these entries, and of course last year too, a lot. So like, if you've got any words of advice or feedback or compliments, words of support to say for anybody else's entries, especially in this sort of dotted semi-brev category, then much appreciated. All right, so I'm gonna try to continue to do a couple more this morning, and those will be released over the following couple of days. So thanks so much, everybody, and I'll see you very soon.